to run the business of state government. So anything from the panel on, are folks telling you cuts only, or are they willing to support revenue, or are there suggestions that you have from what you've heard in the community?
Well, you know, one of the suggestions that I have, one of the suggestions I have for the public education is simply if the legislator or the governor just agree to leave the the money for public education alone and not use that to help fund community college, that would go a long way for us. We don't have the ability to raise tuition for our students. It's free. So just this year alone, if they decide not to take that money and pull it from K-12 and put it into another area, that would not totally solve our problems, but it would go a long way. So just that simple act alone doesn't mean that we would have to tax or give more, but just stop raiding the public education funds. So that's my first thing. The other thing is, you know, I think there are some areas in public education where we can probably look towards consolidating or reduce some of the redundancies, but part of it comes from legislative mandates, just an inordinate amount of paperwork and reports that we have to turn in that eats up valuable time. And then when we contact the State Board of Education, essentially they don't have enough staff to review the reports that we're turning in. So, you know, I think this is just some examples of crazy redundancies that we can start to eliminate that will help us move the goal forward in terms of being able to balance our books in the public school system.
I'd like to say that my son and daughter, and they both went to Ypsilanti Public Schools, K through 12. They got a great education. And I think that keeping a quality public education in Ypsilanti and in the state is extremely important. So I totally agree with Superintendent Martin that we need to fund education. And I think in order to fund these things we're talking about, I think we have to stop thinking of taxes as a dirty word. I think we have to... As Senator Warren said, I think there are a lot of things that attract people to an area. One is, or even businesses to the area. One's the workforce, one's the natural resources, one is the atmosphere, maybe the historic architecture, and yeah, maybe the tax rate too, but is it the top thing? Is it the only thing? No, we gotta stop thinking that it's the only thing that drives people to a state or out of a state. We need to understand that we have a lot of other things going for us. We need to invest in our state. So I think we need to raise taxes on the people that can pay them such that we can keep investing in our city and our state.
Let me say this about public schools and community colleges. I support education at all levels, and I think a lot of us do. We do not want anyone taking anything from anybody. What we have in this state proposed is a huge business tax cut being paid for by senior citizens, low-income people, college students, public schools, police, and fire, and other city workers. That's what we have. And that's not the way to run a state. And that's not what a lot of us, I think, support. And I like hearing Senator Warren wanting to put things on the ballot. As bleak as things may look now, like I said before, things do change. And we need to support education all the way through, from early childhood all the way through higher education. And we need to have a tax structure that makes sense. And cutting business taxes so low-income people get a $1,000 tax increase is just insane. And I think we need to stand up and make sure it doesn't happen.
So another person asked the question that if the governor is successful in getting his proposals through, can we allow our communities to tax themselves? Can we come together and organize and pass some kind of local tax structure that meets our needs in our communities? And you heard me talk about revenue sharing and the fact that we really took from our local communities the ability to have these local options taxes, and we collected the money at the state level, and we were supposed to give it back out to the communities in revenue sharing. I want to answer the question in this way. Michigan has one of the most conservative caps on revenue of any state in the nation. We have the Headley Amendment to our Constitution that says our total revenue into the state government cannot be more than 9.49% of per capita income. So it's not a set amount, it's a percentage of the dollars that we are making here in the state. And that 9.49% is everything we collect. It's every tax, it's sales tax, it's income tax, it's the fees that we charge, that you pay as citizens, or we all pay as citizens. And Michigan right now is nearly $10 billion below the Headley cap. And so what that means is that far from being a high tax state, we are so far below that Headley cap that while there are a lot of folks who have struggled and have suffered in the last few years, why times have been tough, there are also a growing number of Michiganders who are doing better, who are doing fine, and this gap between those who have really struggled and those who are still doing okay is increasing every day. So my gut reaction to this question is, I would rather that the state do our job, that we raise the revenue that we are supposed to raise, that we put it back in the hands of our local communities, our local school districts, and our colleges and universities to be our partners and deliver the high quality services that our citizens should expect. That would be my first choice. Because I think when we don't do that, what we get is a patchwork, community by community, where you have some communities that would happily support an increased millage for education or an increased assessment for local community services, and then you have communities in the state that never would. And so you'd really be creating communities that have and have not on a community by community, county by county basis. So that would not be my first choice. I hope the state elected officials get the political will to do what needs to be done so that we can support our local communities and our local school districts and our roads and our fire and police and our colleges and universities. But should that not happen, should we continue to disinvest in all of those programs, how do the rest of you feel? Should we give you back the authority to tax yourselves locally or pass millages locally that could support the programs that you are trying to run?
Well, actually, as far as cities go, cities have 4 major revenue sources. One is property tax, and in the city of Ypsilanti, we are already at the constitutional limit for property tax rate. We are at 20 mills for the operating tax rate, and that is the constitutional limit. We can't go any higher even if we wanted to ask the voters. Another source of revenue is fees for services. By law, we cannot make money on services, so we can't charge more than it costs us. The third one is state revenue sharing. We talked about that already. That's going down. And the fourth one is a city income tax. In 2007, the city of Ypsilanti asked the voters in the city, should the city incorporate an income tax of 1%? That particular vote, that proposal went down by a factor of 2 to 1. And if the question were asked today, it may be different, may not. But I think if I had my druthers, I think raising the state income tax 1%, at least for the short term, that would raise $1.8 billion according to Senator Warren's. And that's what the budget hole is, just to give you an idea. It would be 1% increase in the state income tax would completely erase the budget deficit that we have. And as I recall, in the New York Times, it listed the budget deficits for each state, and actually Michigan is in the bottom quarter for budget deficits compared to all the other states in the nation. So our situation is not as bad as a lot of other states. So I think we need to take action at the state level. If the state won't do it, we may have to take action at the city level with what we have, but I would rather see it done at the state level.